Most people would agree that airlines don't generally provide 5-star quality meals. There's a reason the food doesn't taste so great, and there are even more reasons why you should avoid eating your in-flight meal altogether that you might not be aware of. Stick around to find out why, and make sure to keep watching till the end to learn what options you have if you really can't wait until you land to chow down. If you've ever endured a long flight and the questionable meals that come with it, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Today, we're showing you the reasons why you should never eat airplane food. The food is not fresh. Modern commercial airplanes are huge, so huge that some are even double-deckers. Unfortunately, all that space translates into what's profitable for the airline company, and a fully equipped kitchen does not make the cut. Typically, the in-flight meals are prepared in a kitchen near the airport. Most meals are either totally pre-cooked or part-cooked, such as chicken that is only 60% cooked or steak that's cooked 30% to done, leaving the final cooking stage to happen in the onboard convection ovens. After this pre-cooking process, the meals are rapidly chilled to 5 degrees Celsius, and then they wait in a refrigerator near the gates before being loaded onto the plane. All of this pre-cooking and blast freezing preparation usually happens a whopping 10 hours before it's scheduled to be eaten by passengers. When mealtime finally does roll around on the flight attendants get to work, reheating the meals in the convection ovens, a process that takes about 20 minutes. This type of oven uses a fan to blow hot air onto the food, allowing for a faster cooking and reheating time and lower temperatures that don't totally destroy the already delicate food and render the meals inedible. While some people might be able to stomach it, we're not totally convinced on the idea of eating a meal that was cooked and chilled 10 hours ago. Airlines are cheap. Every airline is a business, and just like any other business, their main goal is profit. How can they make the most money possible? Cutting down on individual passenger space, say by taking away an inch or two of leg space, to make room for more passengers is one way. More capacity equals more tickets to sell, which in turn means more profit. These companies are cutting corners everywhere they can, as long as it saves them a few bucks or even a few cents, because it all adds up dramatically. Take for example American Airlines, who were able to save $40,000 a year simply by removing one single olive from each of their individual in-flight salads. For another major airline that scrapped olives in their salads altogether, this translated into savings of $3 million a year. It might only be a few cents saved per passenger, but when you have around 80 million passengers, it adds up. Airlines scrutinize every aspect in which saving money is feasible, and a lot of the time, your meals as the passenger are the ultimate sacrifice. They will seek out the cheapest possible ingredients that fit within their tight budgets, so it's probably best to avoid their cheaply bought chicken or beef. Even meals you can purchase in flight are only about as quality as what you'd find pre-made at a convenience store, and they're really just not worth the price. In-flight meals don't taste good. This one is really down to the individual. Some people might be so hungry on their flight that they don't care as much about the taste, but many people agree that the food is not the best quality and doesn't come with the best flavors. If it's your only option and you can't wait a few more hours to eat a meal at your destination, sometimes you can convince yourself that the airplane food tastes good. Part of the reason for the less than appetizing taste is due to the reheating process. The conditions for making the food hot aren't ideal, and it's really the only choice the flight crew has in order to heat your meal. Thus, flavor is sacrificed and you're left with a disappointing meal reminiscent of a frozen TV dinner, right down to ripping off the malleable plastic or aluminum cover. Interestingly, it's not all the fault of the airline. Some of it comes down to your biology and a little bit of physics. The dry air diminishes your sense of smell. The pressurization of the cabin dulls your taste buds, and even the white noise from the humming engine can interfere with the way you perceive taste. These three side effects of flying can create a recipe for disaster for airlines when planning in-flight meals that keep people happy without breaking the bank. The food is ridiculously over-seasoned. To combat the inevitable dulling of passengers' senses while flying, airlines notoriously over-season their in-flight meals. The two tastes that are usually the most affected by low humidity, low air pressure, and lots of background noise common in the cabin environment are saltiness and sweetness. Our ability to taste sour, bitter, and umami flavors usually escapes unscathed. Unfortunately for us passengers, however, this means loading more salt and sugar into our meals to make them more palatable, among other spices and seasonings. The combination of sodium-rich food and a cabin literally drier than a desert does not translate well for people who want to avoid dehydration on a flight. This is especially true given how scarce water seems to be when flying, with flight attendants giving you the tiniest sip of bottled water from a small plastic cup fit for a child but not an adult. Interestingly, umami flavors, also known as savory flavors, seem to be enhanced by the conditions of the cabin environment. This would be a good explanation for why so many people request best to drink tomato juice or even a Bloody Mary when you're 35,000 feet in the air and the only food available is bland, like rice. A strong-tasting, savory drink ends up sounding like the most delectable thing in the world. Airplane meals are not nutritious. Even if your in-flight meal consists of chicken, rice, and broccoli, it's still really not all that healthy. An average airplane meal contains about 1,500 calories and is loaded with fats, salt, and sugar. Each individual item in your meal usually has about 360 to 400 calories in it alone. The reason for all the additives like salt and sugar ties back to the same issue with human tastes and the physics of the plane's cabin. We just can't taste salty and sweet on the plane as we can at sea level. Catering companies need to compensate for that and inject absurd amounts of sugar and salt into the flight meals so people aren't unhappy with how it tastes. An estimated 15 to 20% more sugar is added to in-flight meals just to make it taste the way it would on the ground. No wonder you feel so groggy and tired after eating on the flight. All of these additives, combined with preparation methods and ingredient sources, give enough reason for celebrity chefs like Gordon Ramsay and Anthony Bourdain to avoid airline food. If there is anyone you should trust on that matter, it would be professional chefs. In case you wanted to avoid jet lag a bit or eliminate feelings of fatigue and a foggy head, it's probably best to do what they do and eat something substantial before boarding the plane. And then treat yourself to a nice meal when you land. Gastrointestinal discomfort. Incredibly, your digestive system goes a little haywire at 35,000 feet in the air. It's not to say that it stops working, but it does become a little bit stressed, ultimately leading you to feel a touch bogged down yourself. If you already suffer from gas or cramping for whatever reason, these problems can become significantly more unbearable once you're in the skies. This is due to the air pressure in the cabin being similar to the air pressure you would experience at an altitude around 6,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. At this altitude, or simulation thereof, the body puts more focus on more essential functions, and digestion efficiency is just not one of them. Our body can adjust to altitudinal changes with time, but this process takes days, and a flight doesn't give it enough time to adapt, leading to digestive discomfort. Ideally, to avoid this gastrointestinal problem, it's best to just decline airline food altogether. If you don't give your poorly operating digestive tract a chance to start working while in the air, you'll feel less groggy and energy depleted when you land, simply because your body doesn't have to ramp up your digestive function to finish the job it started on the plane. If you must eat in the air, avoid foods that will contribute to this problem, such as beans, broccoli, and greasy meat. Opt for lighter options instead, such as nuts, carrots, or poultry. Unsanitary dining area. This probably isn't surprising, but bacteria are everywhere. You have more bacterial cells in your body than cells with your own DNA. And it's true, there are bacteria all over planes you have flown in. That is no excuse, however, for the deplorable cleaning habits airlines develop, especially when considering that people will be eating on their vessels. A 2-year study by a team of microbiologists and engineers from Auburn University in Alabama found something quite disturbing. Improperly cleaned seats and tray tables provide a home for E. coli and MRSA, a superbug version of golden staph infection, and they're capable of surviving there for up to a week. We don't know about you, but the idea of eating food from a tray table that might be harboring an antibiotic-resistant bacterium that causes a staph infection is something we find very disturbing. Worse yet, the Federal Aviation Administration doesn't enforce any rules on how regularly an aircraft should be cleaned. This is left to the discretion of the individual airline company, which means some planes could go a full month without a proper deep clean. Most airlines use third-party cleaning companies as well, and the more hours a plane has to stay grounded to be cleaned, the less money the airline company is making. How thorough do you think they are? If you haven't rethought airline food yet, keep watching and you'll surely decline a meal on your next flight. The flight crew eat differently. Did you know that flight attendants don't always eat the airplane food, even if it's provided free of charge? Many flight attendants prefer to bring their own cold snacks and meals so they have control over what they're eating. Most concerns are related to the nutritional content of in-flight meals and how unappetizing they taste. There are several popular blog websites giving tips specifically on how flight attendants can meal prep efficiently and effectively, simply because a vast percentage of them prefer to avoid the airplane food. Some closely knit crews even coordinate meals, like a sort of potluck dinner party at 35,000 feet in the air. If so many members of the very people serving you food choose to avoid that food themselves, why wouldn't you? Perhaps the most unsettling bit of information we learned is that oftentimes when the pilot and co-pilot are eating the airline's provided meals, they must choose different meals. The pilot usually gets the first class meal, with the co-pilot getting business class. This is to lower the risk of food poisoning, because having two food-sick pilots flying your plane is a recipe recipe for disaster. Next time you're starving on a long flight and a flight attendant brings you a meal, don't forget to ask yourself if you'd rather be hungry for a few hours or potentially locked in a laboratory with an upset stomach from the food. What about the drinks? We hate to burst your bubble even more, but you should probably avoid more than just airline food. You can say no to coffee and tea as well. If sanitation is a concern of yours, this is because the water used to make the coffee and tea is stored in tanks aboard the plane. Remember when we talked about the frequency with which planes are cleaned? Not only is it rare, but those tanks are extremely troublesome to clean as well. As such, they're often laden with bacteria, and even E. coli has been found clinging to the walls of the water tanks. That's okay, you might be thinking. If you can't eat the food or drink the coffee or tea, at least you can relax with a glass of wine, right? Wrong. Alcohol and flying do not make very good friends. Due to the lower amount of oxygen in the cabin, the alcohol can be metabolized faster, causing the feelings of drunkenness to be exasperated and leading you closer to potential altitude sickness. If you overdo the drinking and become belligerent, you could even be arrested on landing. It wouldn't be the first time it's happened. Even if you don't overdo the drinking, alcohol will leave you dehydrated in an environment where there is already little humidity. Do us all a favor, skip the booze and ask for a glass of water from a water bottle instead. Your only options. If the thought of enduring a 6+ hour long flight with no food, no drink, not even a coffee to enjoy makes you cringe, we do have some solutions for you. First, you could just eat a filling meal a few hours before you take off. You'll feel energized, be less grumpy, and won't feel tempted by the smells of the cabin's dinner. And while you're at it, purchase a couple of healthy, nourishing snacks while you wait for the boarding time. It'll keep you satiated the entire duration of the flight, and snacking can be fun, mindless activity to enhance your endless movie binge. Finally, if you crave and feel that you absolutely must eat the airplane food, opt for dishes that are super saucy. The philosophy of wetter is better is standard among airplane food. This is because sauce keeps food moist. If the thought of eating chicken reminiscent of sawdust with a side of hard rice makes you shudder, opt for the juiciness and decadence of a beef bourguignon instead. A stew is a fantastic option if you want to eat airline food that tastes and feels like it would on the ground. The nature of a stew isn't ruined by the reheating that occurs on the plane. You can reheat a stew 1,000 times and it will still be a tasty stew. Next time you fly, you'll know what to order. And that's it for This Is Why You Should Never Eat Airplane Food. If you enjoyed our video, make sure to check out 10 secrets flight attendants don't want you to know. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.